Hello, everybody. Rick here. I'm going to talk to you today about the poems for the poetry rewrite assignment. If you want to rewrite your poetry papers, um, I'm very available during finals week, during spring break, for WebEx meetings to talk about them. But let me give some help here on the video with each of the 5 poems. It seemed like people struggled with the same parts of each poem. So let's do Joyce Carol's Broken Connections first. This is the one that has the illustration. People did fine with this, but organizing it was the weak part. And I think you should kind of put the poem aside when you go to write about it. People tried to kind of go down the poem um, and made that shape their paper, and that was tricky. I would step back a little bit, figure out what you want to say about the parts, and organize it a little bit more by your paragraphs, addressing a different section of the poem. So when you deal with the whole broken connections telephone line going down, um, a lot of you weren't sure why she kept saying it was dead. It was really dead. Remember that this is a landline, and so it's unlike a cell phone's reception. When the actual landline went down, you can see it in the picture. That means that until repairmen can come out in a few days after the storm, there will be zero connection. You won't hear anything. It's a dead line. Uh, that allows her then, with that connection absolutely broken, to step outside and to start feeling like, oh, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that. Oh, look at that. All this life out in the world around me, especially during a snowstorm, was kind of dramatic. And it was all been going on before the broken connection of the telephone. But it's funny. It's almost like the speaker wakes up to it and goes, wow, all these things I didn't see that I wasn't connected to. Because I was connected to some distant voice by the telephone, it disconnected me from my environment. The phone connection gets broken. Suddenly she's out there like, oh, look at that, look at that. And she starts thinking about it a little bit differently. She says, oh, somebody owns this land, but he's not controlling it or she doesn't control it. It has a life of its own. And that's where it gets interesting. So I think you guys did pretty well with that, but I think organizing ideas could help with Joyce Carol's broken connections. D.H. Lawrence. A lot of you wrote about either the snake or the mountain lion. Let me deal with the snake first. I said it was fine for a number of you to take a more religious view of the snake and to treat the poem as a debate. But that's only very few of you who want to do that. I think most of you want to go the opposite direction. And when the speaker of the poem says he does not want to see the snake as a symbol of anything different than just a snake, he means I don't want it to be the serpent from the Old Testament. I don't want it to be in the guise of a snake, in the disguise of a snake, really a supernatural being who is going to try to have me lose paradise and perhaps eternity. He wants you to see the snake as a being that its consciousness is purely animal consciousness. That's why he says, I don't trust my own education here. My education says, get behind me, Satan. And another part of him says, oh, that's a snake. Have I really thought about a snake before? How, we both came to the same spot for the same reason, to get water. We both need water to survive. But then our consciousnesses, the world, and what are we thinking about the other? It might be that some snakes have an instinctual mistrust or wariness of human beings, but it would be like Lawrence is suggesting because of nature and instinct, right? It would be the snake doesn't think thoughts like, oh, there's a human being. They're always maligning me in their books. What's with that? I resent that. I don't know. The snake has no consciousness of what thoughts we might have about him, especially if they tie to mythology or religion or history or mythology or any kind of form where we're using our imaginations to embellish, anthropomorphize uh, an animal. The snake in the poem, I think, is just having very snake-like snake thoughts, and that makes the conflict between the two of them more interesting to me. All right, the other poem by Lawrence. People did such a great job with Mountain Lion. So those of you who wrote about it, I strongly encourage you to do rewrites. The papers are already excellent, but many of them had a kind of squishy middle part that didn't work so well because you were trying maybe to avoid or gloss over it. I think the key to this poem is the part that many of you glossed over. He's a little bit horrified, I think, the speaker of the poem, by the face of the dead mountain lion. It's so clearly not a living, vibrant, conscious thing, moving thing, right? Um, but I think he's trying to be real to what he saw. It does, however, have the effect that it makes him continue to think about the mountain lion. And again, I like the way that he doesn't get all corny and sentimental and imagine her up in her lair, just using his artist imagination. He forces himself to be like, no, she's not there. All that's left is a little hole where she lived, and it's so humble and doesn't bring back this magnificent creature. And one of you pointed out, and this was such an excellent insight, that all that's left are the twigs. As if Lawrence says, you want me to paint this beautiful lioness there, and then you're gonna feel better about this. I won't do it. She's gone. And then to really make us feel the loss of this being, there's a flash, almost like a ghostly appearance. And he says that was what is not here. That was the actual lioness. He wasn't a creature sitting in a lair like she's posing for a Sears portrait. Um, it was the living, vibrant, moving thing. Think of her as a predator, and then she plunges and kills the prey. That is the real essence of mountain lion, and it's not because she's cruel. It's because that is what mountain lionesses do. They flash, and the next thing you know, uh, you're prey. So I think that was the part of the poem that you guys struggled with, the vision of the flash. What words there are key? Why is that vision at the center of the poem? Is that what um, he wants us to take from the poem? This sense of a flashing thing that is now gone. All right, HD Silkworm, set during the London Blitz. Now, most of you who wrote about it, I think you forgot that setting. That's fine. The poem is very interesting about a worm persevering and just kind of chewing its way through existence, surviving storms, staying out of the sight of nasty birds. Um, in the end, by just chewing through leaves and just staying low and persevering, creates out of itself this shroud, this beautiful silk shroud that the silkworm with this amazing kind of, I want to say arrogance, but it really should be seen as pride, right? Because it's proud of its work that it did, and it's saying it's not me, it's the glory of God. This is how God manifests in this beautiful thing. Well, it's been true for all time that many people have said when you see a beautiful sunset or a beautiful waterfall or anything beautiful in nature, you say, oh, well, that's God manifesting. That's God's work. That's why nature's so celebrated for its wonders, right? Fills people with the belief in something larger than us. So I think it's fine to read the poem as being about a silkworm. I also think it's interesting to say that HD, who survived in the London Blitz, doesn't cast herself as a very heroic figure. She's not manning a anti-aircraft gun. Um, it's kind of funny if you knew what she looked like. She was a very frail, willowy woman. You can't really see her as a, you know, uh, World War II fighter. She seems to be saying that this is kind of God is on the side of the worm. Certainly not on the side of the Luftwaffe, which would have been the angry birds flying above, right? Uh, Perseverance, how to survive through adversity when you are comparatively powerless, right? The silkworm can't fight back. So I love that in the end, of course, the silkworm perseveres and produces this shroud that kind of says, I survived. And the poet, HD, produces this amazing poem out of herself, out of the experience. And she says, and I persevered. I put one word after another, and at the end, I had this beautiful thing. I also tend to think that HD's poems are going to last a long, long time. And the last Poet artist was Joni Mitchell. Black Crow, similar story with the HD poem. I had mentioned to you guys that because Joni Mitchell was a rock star, uh, she often wrote about the difficulties of being on the road all the time, how it really hurt relationships, uh, made it very hard for her to feel like she had a home life, uh, and made her always feel like she was always traveling like a crow, that her home almost seemed to be something she was away from more than she was able to enjoy. People wrote about all those things. It might make sense if you want to return to the poem and give a little bit more uh, attention to it. I think people did gloss over some of the more tricky lines. If you want to, it is okay to mention that when she wrote the song Black Crow, it did come out of a period of her career when she was briefly using cocaine and also realized how very dangerous that was and how that tied to the whole rock and roll lifestyle and how like it's flying too high, right? She's been flying on this cocaine and down the white line of the highway. And it's time to acknowledge that she's all burnt out from it. The last stanza is very haggard, right? Haggard light, and the feeling is this flying and flying, flying thing. It's too manic. Look how many rock stars burned out and died, including some of her friends. She was friends with Jimi Hendrix at the end of his life. He was a great admirer of her music. All right. Choice Killers, Broken Connections, Two by Lawrence, Snake, and um, Mountain Lion, HD, Silkworm, Joni Mitchell, Black Crow. I think I touched on all the big stuff. Um, and like I said, take advantage of emailing me and setting up an appointment if you want to talk more.